I never saw it coming. It was supposed to be just another night, just another party, a distraction from the ache of my own loneliness. But when I walked into that room, everything shifted. The air was thick with laughter, music thumping in the background, a hazy cloud of alcohol and perfume filling the space. I had always prided myself on blending in, keeping to the edges, not drawing attention. But tonight something felt different. I couldn't pinpoint it. I tried to hide, of course. Found my usual spot by the bar, nursing a drink I didn't really want. But the moment I turned my head, our eyes met. His name was Noah, and something in that fleeting glance sent a jolt straight through me. I'd seen him around, knew of him, but we had never spoken. He was different, unapologetically himself, with an aura that dared the world to notice. And that night he noticed me. Not in the way you'd expect, though. He didn't smile or wave. He didn't approach me with any pretense. Instead, he simply watched me with an intensity I couldn't escape. The weight of his gaze felt like an invitation, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Are you ready to be seen? I thought I could handle it. I thought I could ignore it, retreat into the safe corners of the room and pretend it didn't matter. But then, just as the crowd around me shifted, Noah was there. His presence was like a ripple in the water, moving through the space, drawing me in without ever needing to try. He was standing too close, and for the first time that night, I couldn't breathe. It wasn't the way his hand brushed mine. No, it was the way everything in the room seemed to fade when he leaned in. The world went silent. Even though the music still played, the voices still echoed in my ears. I could feel my heart hammering, my pulse quickening. Then, with a quiet confidence that left no room for doubt, Noah whispered in my ear, "You've been hiding for too long." Before I could even respond, before my brain could catch up with the shock of it all, he kissed me. It was nothing like I had imagined, and yet everything I had ever dreamed of. His lips were warm, soft, and suddenly the noise in the room didn't matter. Nothing else mattered. The kiss was electric, like lightning coursing through my veins, setting my skin on fire. I could feel it in the marrow of my bones, a connection so raw, so unexpected that I couldn't pull away. It was a kiss that felt like a promise and a betrayal all at once. And just like that, my entire world was shifted on its axis. It was impossible. A kiss. One kiss, and it felt like he had taken everything I had built up to protect myself from the world. My defenses crumbled in an instant, and all I could do was stand there, frozen, feeling like I had been hit by a freight train. The kiss ended, but the fire inside me was just beginning to burn. Noah pulled away slowly, his eyes holding mine as if he was waiting for something, waiting for me to respond, to do something. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to feel. All I knew was that my heart, that fragile thing I had kept locked away, had just been stolen in the span of a heartbeat. I didn't understand what had just happened. One moment I was a stranger in my own skin, lost in a sea of noise and chaos, and the next I was, alive in a way I had never experienced before. My heart was racing, my thoughts a tangled mess of confusion and desire. I wanted to pull away, to retreat, to go back to my old life where everything was predictable, controlled. But Noah, with that kiss, had unraveled something deep inside me that I didn't know existed. Something raw, something primal. I had lived in the shadows for so long, afraid to love, afraid to be loved. But in one devastatingly perfect moment, Noah had torn those walls down with a single kiss. I should have run. I should have excused myself and left the party, fled back to the safety of my apartment where I could hide from what had just happened. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw something more than desire. I saw understanding, an understanding that terrified me more than anything. It was as if he knew me better than I knew myself, saw through all the masks I wore, straight into the parts of me I had long buried. There was no judgment, no pity, just an invitation to step into something unknown, something dangerous. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. My mind was screaming at me to say something smart, to push him away, to retreat into what I knew. But my body betrayed me. It leaned toward him, drawn like a moth to a flame. He didn't move. He didn't pressure me. He just stood there, watching me with an intensity that made my skin tingle, as if waiting for me to make the next move. And I did. Slowly, hesitantly, I reached up to touch his face. The moment my fingertips brushed his skin, it felt like everything clicked into place. The world around us faded, and it was just him and me in that space, in that moment. I felt the weight of everything I had ever feared. The fear of loving someone who might not love me back. The fear of opening my heart and being crushed under the weight of it all. But with Noah, all of that faded away. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about the consequences. I wasn't thinking at all. I just was. Then, just as quickly as it started, the moment was shattered. A voice, loud and sharp, cut through the tension. "Noah, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I jumped back, the spell broken. A tall figure stood in the doorway, eyes burning with anger, hands clenched at his sides. Noah didn't flinch. Instead, he just smiled, that same confident, almost dangerous smile that had first drawn me in. I had no idea who this new person was or why he was so furious, but his presence was undeniable. He looked at me with something close to disdain before turning his gaze back to Noah. "You know what this means, right?" the stranger said, his voice seething with something I couldn't quite place. Noah didn't respond. He didn't need to. He just took a step toward me, pulling me into his orbit once again. I was caught between the storm that had already begun to brew, unable to look away, unable to move. And just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, Noah spoke, his voice low, almost playful. "It means nothing. Not yet, anyway." The words sent a chill down my spine. What did he mean? What was I walking into? Was this just some game to him, something fleeting, or was there something deeper hidden beneath the surface? All I knew in that moment was that I couldn't resist. Whatever this was, whatever he was, I couldn't stop myself from wanting more. The air between us was thick with unspoken words, heavy with tension, and I couldn't tell if it was desire or fear that was choking me. The stranger in the doorway seemed to freeze, watching us like a hawk, but Noah, still standing so close, barely acknowledged him. It was as if the entire room had stopped spinning, as if the world outside didn't exist. All that mattered in that split second was Noah and the pull he had on me. He reached out again, this time gently grazing my wrist, his touch sending a shock of warmth through my body. I wanted to speak, to demand answers, but I couldn't. Words felt too small, too insignificant in the face of what was happening. I had spent years perfecting the art of self-protection, locking away parts of myself that I couldn't afford to share. But with Noah, it felt like everything I had buried was starting to rise to the surface. My vulnerabilities, my fears, my longing, all of it suddenly felt like a tidal wave crashing through me, and I couldn't hold it back. Not when he was looking at me like that, like he knew exactly what I needed before I even understood it myself. The urge to fall into him, to let myself be consumed by whatever this was, grew stronger with every passing second. "You're not like the others," Noah said quietly, almost to himself, his eyes not leaving mine. The stranger in the doorway shifted, a scoff escaping his lips. But Noah didn't take his eyes off me. There was something in the way he said it, something heavy, as if those words were more than just an observation. It felt like a challenge, like an invitation to something far beyond what I could comprehend. The air was electric now, charged with something deeper, something darker. My pulse quickened as I realized that whatever I thought I knew about myself, about my life, was about to be thrown into chaos. And then, as if on cue, the stranger stormed into the room, his anger crackling like a live wire. "You can't keep doing this," he spat at Noah, his voice trembling with fury. "You don't get to play with people's lives like this. Not again." His words hit me like a punch in the gut, and I took a step back, suddenly realizing that I was standing in the middle of something much bigger than I had anticipated. The tension in the room was suffocating, the air thick with resentment and history I couldn't quite grasp. I looked at Noah, his expression unreadable now, his lips pressed into a thin line. "You don't get to decide that for me," Noah replied, his tone cold, controlled. He didn't look at the stranger anymore. His focus was entirely on me. "What I do or don't do is mine alone." I could see the sharp edge in his words, the quiet strength that radiated from him. He was confident, sure of himself in a way that made my heart ache. The stranger's glare didn't falter, but there was a brief flicker of hesitation in his eyes as he took one last look at Noah, and then turned to me. "Don't let him fool you," the stranger warned, his voice low but insistent. "This is how it starts. One moment you're the center of his universe. The next, you're nothing more than a game to him. I've seen it happen before." And just like that, my world tilted again. Was Noah a player, a manipulator, or was this something I couldn't even begin to understand? My mind was racing, trying to piece together the puzzle, but nothing made sense. I couldn't even tell if I was angry, scared, or something else. Noah's eyes flicked toward the stranger, his jaw tightening ever so slightly, but his gaze never left me. He took a slow step forward, closing the distance between us. "I'm not here to play games, but I never promised anyone anything. Not even you," he said softly, and in that moment I knew he wasn't talking to the stranger. He was talking to me. My heart pounded in my chest as his words sank in. What was I supposed to do with that? Was he telling me that whatever had just happened, whatever this connection was, wasn't guaranteed, that it might be fleeting like everything else in my life? Or was he offering me something deeper, something more real than I had ever known? I wanted to scream, to demand answers. But instead I stood there, frozen, caught between two worlds. The one I had carefully built for myself and the one Noah was offering, wild, uncertain, and full of risks I was terrified to take. I had always told myself that I wasn't the type of person to fall for someone quickly. I wasn't the type to let my heart be swayed by someone's charm or allure. But everything about this, about Noah, was breaking down every wall I had spent years building. It wasn't just his words that had me trembling, but the way he looked at me, the way his presence made me feel like I was standing on the edge of something huge, something life-changing, yet completely terrifying. The touch of his hand on mine felt like both a promise and a warning, a beautiful contradiction that I couldn't quite understand. And yet, despite the chaos swirling around us, I didn't want to pull away. I didn't want to run. I had already let him in without even realizing how, and there was no turning back now. The air in the room was thick with tension as the stranger, still looming in the doorway, glared at us both. His eyes were filled with a kind of bitterness that I couldn't quite place, but I could feel it like a weight pressing down on my chest. He knew something I didn't, something dark and unspoken, and that thought made my heart beat faster in my chest. I needed to know what that was, needed to understand why Noah, this stranger who had kissed me with such intensity, seemed so unaffected by the accusations being thrown his way. What had he done to this man to make him this angry, this desperate to pull me away? I wanted to ask, wanted to demand answers. But before I could even open my mouth, Noah's voice interrupted the silence. "Let him go," Noah said, his words firm but gentle, like a command wrapped in a whisper. He didn't look at the stranger, didn't even acknowledge him directly. His eyes were locked on me, like I was the only thing in the room that mattered. "He's not the one you need to worry about." I didn't understand the full weight of those words at first, but something about them hit me like a ton of bricks. Let him go. Was that Noah's way of telling me to stop listening to the stranger, to stop being afraid of the unknown? I didn't know. But the way Noah said it, so sure, so unshaken, told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't trying to control me. He was simply letting me choose. The stranger's face twisted in disbelief, as if Noah's calmness had shattered something inside him. "You're really that far gone, aren't you?" he spat, his voice laced with venom. "You think you can keep doing this? You think you can keep dragging people into your mess and leaving them behind when you're done?" The word stung, but it wasn't the stranger's anger that rattled me. It was the fear I heard in his voice, a fear of losing control, of losing something important, something I couldn't name. My eyes flickered from the stranger to Noah, searching for something in his expression that might give me the answers I so desperately wanted. But Noah's face remained calm, unreadable, as if nothing in this moment was outside of his control. He finally turned to face the stranger fully, his gaze unflinching, like he wasn't bothered by the venom being thrown his way. "I don't need to be saved," Noah said softly, his voice almost distant now, like he was speaking to himself more than anyone else. "And I'm not here to save anyone else, I'm just here." It was a simple statement, and yet it held so much weight. Just here. It was a declaration of his own freedom, a refusal to be bound by anyone's expectations, anyone's judgments, and it hit me harder than anything he had said before. It was the kind of freedom I had never allowed myself to experience. But standing here in this moment, with Noah's presence surrounding me, I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was what I had been searching for all along. I had been so afraid of being seen, of letting someone close enough to really see me. But with Noah, everything felt different. There was no judgment, no hesitation. He wasn't asking for anything from me, and yet everything in me screamed that I wanted to give him everything. Even with the stranger's anger burning in the background, even with the heavy weight of the unknown pressing down on us, Noah was the only thing I could focus on. He had stolen my heart with one kiss, yes, but more than that, he had shown me a side of myself I had buried so deep I'd forgotten it was even there. A side that yearned for something real, something raw, something unashamed. Noah's hand still held mine, warm and steady, a constant anchor in the midst of the storm. The stranger's words had begun to fade into the background, his presence nothing more than an echo, a shadow trying to steal the light that Noah had brought into the room. "This isn't over," the stranger muttered under his breath as he turned and left, his footsteps heavy and final. But for me it was over. I had made my choice. And as Noah's gaze softened, his thumb gently brushing over my knuckles, I knew I wasn't walking away. Not this time. What came next I didn't know, but I wasn't afraid anymore. With Noah, I was finally ready to step into the fire. The door slammed shut behind the stranger, and with it, the last remnants of the tension in the room seemed to evaporate. But even in his absence, I could still feel the weight of his words, heavy on my chest, like an unwanted memory that wouldn't fade. "This isn't over." The phrase echoed in my mind, a constant reminder that nothing in this world, especially not something as raw and uncharted as what Noah and I were starting, could ever be simple or straightforward. I looked up at Noah, his face still soft with that quiet, knowing smile, and realized something terrifying. I was no longer sure who was the one pulling the strings here. Was it me? Was it him? Or was it the both of us, pulled together by something stronger than logic, stronger than reason, stronger than fear? He seemed to sense my thoughts before I could even voice them. "I told you," Noah said, his voice low, almost reverent. "This is yours if you want it, but you don't have to. It's your choice." The weight of his words settled into me like an anchor, and for a moment I let myself breathe. He wasn't pushing me. He wasn't trying to force anything. He was offering me a chance to choose this, to choose him, or to walk away. And that choice, more than anything, scared me more than any uncertainty about what lay ahead. The truth was, I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I could trust him, or if I was just falling for the illusion of something that felt too perfect to be real. I stared at him, my breath caught in my throat. It was impossible to ignore the pull, the gravity that seemed to draw me toward him. Every part of me, every hidden corner of my soul, screamed to take the leap, to let go of the carefully constructed walls I'd built over the years and dive into something unknown. But in the back of my mind, the doubts continued to swirl, those lingering fears of getting hurt, of being let down. I had been here before, caught between desire and fear, and I had always chosen safety. But this time it was different. This time the stakes were higher. This wasn't just about my heart, it was about everything. And then Noah did something that changed everything. He stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. He didn't rush, didn't push, but he closed the distance between us slowly, as if giving me space to back away if I wanted to. But I didn't move. I couldn't. When he reached out to touch my face again, his fingers brushing my jaw with a tenderness that made my heart twist, I realized that this wasn't just about the fire he'd started with that first kiss. This was about trust, about finding something in each other that neither of us had expected. He was showing me with every inch of his being that I wasn't a game to him, that I wasn't just a temporary spark. He was offering me something real. And in that moment, I realized that I had already made my choice. I had already let him in. Noah's lips brushed against mine again, softly this time, as if asking for permission to continue. I didn't need to think. I didn't need to question it. I kissed him back, a kiss that was no longer about curiosity or uncertainty. It was about surrender, about letting go of everything I had ever known. It wasn't just a kiss, it was a promise. A promise to stop running, to stop hiding, and to let myself feel something real, even if it was messy, even if it was terrifying. Because with Noah, for the first time in my life, I didn't have to pretend. I didn't have to be afraid. I was finally me. And as I pulled him closer, letting the fire between us burn even brighter, I realized that I didn't need to know what would happen next. I didn't need to control it, to have every step figured out. All I needed was to embrace the uncertainty, to trust that whatever came next, whatever this was, would be worth it. And in that moment, with Noah's arms wrapped around me, I knew that I would never let him go. Not because I had to, but because for the first time in my life I didn't want to. And as we stood there, tangled in each other's arms, I realized that love wasn't a game. It wasn't about winning or losing. It was about finding the courage to leap into the unknown, hand in hand, heart in heart. And I was